When a ruthless gang attacks a man named Ethan and his young daughter Lily in what they think will be an easy act of intimidation, they have no idea who they're dealing with. What they don't realize is that Ethan, the man they've brutally targeted, is a former Navy SEAL, a warrior with the skills and determination to ensure justice is served. This is a tale of courage, justice, and a family's unwavering strength in the face of hate. Before we dive into this powerful story, let us know where you're tuning in from and if you believe in standing up for what's right. Don't forget to like and subscribe. The late afternoon sun bathed the bustling downtown park in a golden glow, casting long shadows of children darting across the pavement. Ethan Carter sat on a wooden bench, his gaze fixed on his 7-year-old daughter, Lily. She swung back and forth, her laughter blending with the distant hum of city traffic and the chirping of birds. "Daddy," Lily called out, her legs pumping energetically as she tried to touch the sky with her feet. Ethan chuckled, his smile warm but fleeting. "You've got it, Lil. Just hold tight." Lily's curls bounced with each swing, her carefree joy reminding Ethan why he cherished these weekends. They didn't come often, and he wanted to make every second count. Despite the idyllic setting, Ethan's instincts hummed in the background, a sixth sense honed by years as a Navy SEAL. He subtly scanned the park. Most families were preoccupied with picnics or games of frisbee, but near the edge of the tree line, a group of 4 men loitered. Ethan noted their furtive glances and low murmurs. One of them, a tall man with a shaved head and a faded leather jacket, leaned casually against a tree, his arms crossed. Another, wiry with hollow cheeks, flicked a cigarette to the ground and crushed it under his boot. They weren't here for the swings or the sun. "Daddy," Lily's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to her, his smile returning. "Yeah, baby. I want to try the monkey bars next," she declared, already hopping off the swing. "Go ahead. I'm right here." She sprinted toward the play structure, her tiny feet kicking up dirt. Ethan stood, hands in his pockets, his eyes following her. He adjusted his stance, his body instinctively angled toward the men. They hadn't moved yet, but he didn't like the way their conversation seemed to grow quieter as they glanced his way. Lily's squeals of delight as she navigated the monkey bars were interrupted by the crunch of boots on gravel. Ethan turned his head, his sharp gaze locking onto the approaching group. "Afternoon," the tall man drawled, his voice thick with mock politeness. His grin didn't reach his eyes as he stepped closer, flanked by his crew. "Can I help you?" Ethan asked, his tone neutral but firm. He subtly positioned himself between the men and Lily, who had stopped playing to watch. "I think it's time for you to leave," the man said, his grin twisting into a sneer. "We don't welcome people like you around here." Ethan exhaled slowly, his hands remaining at his sides. "We're just here for some father-daughter time. Why don't you move along?" The wiry man snickered, stepping to the side to form a loose semicircle surrounding Ethan. "Daddy, who are they?" Lily tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "It's okay, baby," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Go sit by the bench. Stay there no matter what." Lily hesitated, her wide eyes filled with confusion, but obeyed, retreating toward the bench as the men stepped closer. "Smart move," the tall man said, his smirk widening. "Wouldn't want the little princess getting hurt." Ethan's jaw tightened. "This is your last chance to walk away." The tall man laughed, a harsh, guttural sound that made the others chuckle. "Look at him. All tough guy. What are you going to do?" "Huh." Before the tall man could finish his sentence, one of his crew shoved Ethan. But Ethan didn't wait for the first punch. As the wiry man lunged, Ethan sidestepped, grabbing his wrist and twisting sharply. The man howled in pain as Ethan shoved him to the ground. Another attacker swung a fist, but Ethan ducked, delivering a precise elbow to the man's ribs. Bryce rushed forward, throwing a wild punch that grazed Ethan's shoulder. Ethan countered with a swift kick to Bryce's knee, sending him stumbling backward. "Is that all you've got?" Bryce spat, wiping blood from his lip. The fight escalated. 2 of the men circled Ethan while Bryce charged again. Ethan moved with precision, blocking blows and landing strikes that left his attackers reeling. His focus never wavered. But the odds were overwhelming. One of the younger men grabbed a branch from the ground. Swinging it like a club, Ethan caught it mid-swing, yanking it from the man's grasp before slamming it against his leg. The man crumpled with a scream. Bryce tackled Ethan from behind, and they hit the ground hard. Ethan winced as sharp pain shot through his ribs, but he rolled, using Bryce's momentum to throw him off. Lily screamed from the bench, her voice piercing through the chaos. "Daddy, stop!" Ethan glanced at her for a split second, long enough for one of the men to land a blow to his side. He grunted, staggering but refusing to fall. With a final surge of effort, Ethan swung a fist into Bryce's jaw, sending him sprawling. Blood dripped from Ethan's mouth as he faced the remaining attackers, his stance steady despite the pain radiating through his body. Bryce, clutching his jaw, spat on the ground. "You're going to regret this, old man. Let's go." The gang retreated, dragging their injured comrades away. Ethan didn't chase them. Instead, he staggered to the bench where Lily was crying, her small hands reaching for him. "Daddy," she wailed, tears streaming down her face. Ethan knelt, his breath labored. He cupped her cheek with a trembling hand. "It's okay, baby. I'm okay, but I need you to do something." "All right." Lily nodded, sniffling as Ethan handed her his phone. "Call 911. Tell them we're at the park. Can you do that?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice shaking. Ethan smiled faintly before his vision blurred. He collapsed onto the grass, his body finally succumbing to the pain. Lily's cries echoed in his ears as darkness closed in. Lily clutched her father's phone with trembling fingers, her small hands fumbling as she tried to unlock it. Tears blurred her vision, but she forced herself to focus. She remembered the passcode, her birthday. The screen lit up, and she quickly dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" The calm voice on the other end was a lifeline. "My dad. He's hurt." Lily's voice cracked, panic spilling into her words. "We're at the park. Some bad men. They hurt him." The dispatcher's tone softened, steady and reassuring. "Okay, sweetie. I'm sending help. Are you and your dad in a safe place right now?" Lily glanced around. The men were gone, but the sight of her father lying still on the ground terrified her. "They're gone. But my dad, he's not waking up." "It's okay," the dispatcher assured her. "Can you tell me your name?" "Lily Carter," she whispered, her voice shaking. "All right, Lily. Help is on the way. I need you to stay calm for your dad." "Okay. Is there anyone nearby who can help you?" Lily looked up to see a middle-aged woman jogging toward her, her face etched with concern. "There's someone coming," she said, relief seeping into her voice. The jogger, who introduced herself as Miss Price, knelt beside Lily. "Are you all right, sweetheart? What happened?" Lily pointed to Ethan. "It's my daddy. He's hurt bad. Please help him." Miss Price checked Ethan's pulse, her brow furrowing. "He's breathing, but we need to get help here fast." Within minutes, the sound of sirens pierced the air. A police car and ambulance pulled up to the scene, red and blue lights flashing across the park. Officer Eva Torres stepped out of the squad car, her eyes immediately scanning the scene. She spotted Lily standing near Ethan's unconscious form, her face streaked with tears. Torres approached slowly, crouching to meet the girl's eye level. "Hey there, sweetheart," she said gently. "I'm Officer Torres. You must be Lily." Lily nodded, clutching the phone tightly. "The bad men hurt my daddy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Torres glanced at Ethan, her sharp eyes taking in the bruises and blood. The paramedics were already working, assessing his injuries. As the paramedics prepared to move Ethan onto a stretcher, Officer Torres said, "You're very brave for calling us. Lily, your dad's going to get help now." Lily's lip quivered. "Will he be okay?" Torres placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "He's strong, just like you. We're going to take good care of him." As the paramedics lifted Ethan onto the stretcher, his eyes fluttered open for a moment. His vision was blurry, but he recognized Lily's voice. "Lily," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "I'm here, Daddy," Lily cried, Rushing to his side, Ethan reached out weakly, his fingers brushing against hers. "You're so brave. Baby girl, stay with me." "Okay, I will," she promised, gripping his hand tightly. As the paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, Torres helped Lily climb into the back. As it sped toward the hospital, the little girl sat beside her father, her small hand clutching his. She blinked back tears, determined to be brave like he told her. Do you think Ethan will make it? Give this video a like if you do and comment below if you think the people who attacked Ethan deserve to be put behind bars. Stick around because this story is far from over. You won't want to miss what happens next. At the hospital, the emergency room buzzed with controlled chaos as doctors and nurses rushed Ethan into surgery. Lily was left in a waiting area, her tiny figure dwarfed by the chairs around her. Officer Torres knelt beside her again, her expression soft but serious. "Sweetheart, we need to call your mom. Do you know her number?" Lily nodded, rattling off the digits she knew by heart. Torres stepped away, pulling out her phone to make the call. It rang twice before a clipped professional voice answered. "This is Naomi Carter." "Miss Carter, this is Officer Eva Torres with the police department. I'm calling about your daughter, Lily." Naomi's tone immediately shifted, concern coloring her words. "What's happened? Is Lily okay?" "She's safe, but her father, Ethan, was attacked at the park. He's at County General Hospital undergoing treatment. Lily is here with me." There was a beat of silence, then a sharp intake of breath. "Oh my God, I'll be there right away." Naomi hung up without another word, her heart pounding as she grabbed her keys. Memories of Ethan and Lily together flooded her mind. Despite the tension between her and Ethan, the thought of something happening to him filled her with guilt and fear. The fluorescent lights in the hospital waiting room buzzed softly, casting a sterile glow over the anxious faces of Naomi and Lily. Naomi paced back and forth, her arms crossed tightly against her chest. Lily sat on a chair, her legs swinging nervously as she clutched the stuffed bear a nurse had given her. A doctor finally emerged from the operating room, his scrubs stained and his face calm but tired. Naomi rushed forward, her voice breaking. "How is he?" "He's stable," the doctor said, his tone measured. "The injuries were severe, multiple fractures, internal bleeding, but we were able to repair the damage. He's not out of the woods yet, but his condition is no longer life-threatening." Naomi exhaled sharply, a mixture of relief and lingering fear. "Can I see him?" "He's still unconscious," the doctor explained, "but you can sit with him in the recovery room." Lily's grip tightened on her bear. "I want to see Daddy too." Naomi crouched beside her daughter, brushing a curl from her face. "We'll go together, sweetheart, but Daddy needs rest, so we have to be quiet." "Okay." Lily nodded solemnly, and they followed the doctor down the hallway. In the recovery room, Ethan lay motionless on the bed, his face pale and battered. Wires and monitors surrounded him, the steady beeping of the heart monitor the only sound in the room. Lily climbed onto a chair beside the bed, her small hand reaching for his. "Daddy," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm here. Please wake up." Naomi stood at the foot of the bed, her emotions a turbulent mix. She hadn't spoken to Ethan much since their divorce, but seeing him like this stirred memories of the man she once knew, strong, determined, and fiercely protective of his daughter. Officer Torres entered the hospital room quietly, her notepad in hand. She nodded at Naomi before kneeling beside Lily. "Hey there, Lily," she said gently. "I need your help to catch the bad men who hurt your dad. Do you think you can tell me what they look like?" Lily sniffled, glancing at Ethan before nodding. "The leader. He was big with short hair. He had a scar here," she said, pointing to her cheek. "And his friends. One had a cigarette. He kept looking at me." Torres scribbled furiously, her expression hardening. "You're doing great. Lily, did they say anything to you or your dad?" Lily hesitated, her voice trembling. "The big one said I could stay, but Daddy couldn't. He said people like Daddy don't belong." Naomi's hands clenched into fists, her anger spilling over. "This isn't the first time I've heard about something like this. How does this keep happening?" Torres sighed, her professionalism tinged with frustration. It's not right. We're going to do everything we can to bring these men to justice. Your daughter's description is a good start. Naomi folded her arms. I want these men found. If the system can't protect my daughter and her father, what good is it? Torres nodded, her tone firm. I understand. I'll make sure this case gets the attention it deserves. Hours later, Ethan stirred, his eyelids fluttering open. His groggy gaze settled on Lily first, and her face lit up. Daddy, she cried, leaping from her chair to grab his hand. Hey, baby, Ethan murmured, his voice raspy. He winced as he tried to sit up, the pain flaring through his ribs. Don't move, Naomi said sharply, stepping forward. You're still recovering. Ethan's eyes shifted to her, surprise flickering across his face. Naomi? You scared us half to death, she said, her voice softening despite her words. Torres appeared in the doorway, her expression relieved but focused. Good to see you awake. Mr. Carter, we have some leads thanks to Lily. Ethan's jaw tightened. I want in. Absolutely not. Naomi interjected, her tone brooking no argument. You need to rest. You're in no condition to play hero. This isn't about playing hero, Ethan said firmly, his voice gaining strength. Those men came after me and my daughter. They're not stopping until they're caught. Torres hesitated. You're a critical witness, Mr. Carter, but I don't want you risking your recovery. Ethan met her gaze, his determination unyielding. I'm not sitting on the sidelines. If I can help, I will. Torres studied him for a moment before nodding. There's something off about this group. This wasn't random. I'll keep you in the loop, but promise me you'll prioritize your health. Naomi sighed, rubbing her temples. You're as stubborn as ever. Ethan offered a faint smile. And you wouldn't have it any other way. The tension in the room softened for a moment, but the weight of the situation lingered. There was more to uncover, and Ethan wasn't about to let his injuries hold him back. The precinct buzzed with activity as Officer Torres and her team pored over the details of the case. The faint hum of computers and the shuffle of papers filled the air as a technician projected surveillance footage from the park onto a large screen. There, Torres pointed at the grainy footage, her sharp eyes catching the glint of a vehicle's license plate as Bryce's gang sped away. Enhance that section. The technician zoomed in, clarifying the image as much as the pixelation would allow. They could make out a partial plate, 9G5. It's not much, Torres muttered, but it's a start. Another officer approached, holding a notepad. A witness at the park saw the vehicle head toward the industrial area on the east side of town. Matches the description of a known hangout for petty gangs. Let's move, Torres ordered, grabbing her jacket. Later that evening, the squad converged on a decrepit warehouse nestled in the shadows of abandoned factories. As Torres and her team raided the location, the scene inside made her blood run cold. The space was littered with all kinds of criminal activity, counterfeit IDs, bundles of cash, and weapons. But it was a corner of the room that left everyone silent. Child-sized restraints were bolted to the floor alongside rolls of duct tape, bottles of chloroform, and a crude map marked with circles, parks, and playgrounds across the city. Torres's jaw tightened as she surveyed the evidence. This wasn't just a mugging, she said grimly, her voice cutting through the silence. They were planning something far worse. Back at the precinct, Torres debriefed Naomi and Ethan in a small, sterile room. Ethan sat stiffly in his wheelchair, his bandaged ribs making every movement a chore. Naomi paced behind him, her expression a mixture of fear and fury. What did you find? Ethan asked, his voice firm despite his injuries. Torres hesitated before speaking. The men who attacked you weren't just looking to intimidate. Based on the evidence we found, they were likely targeting your daughter for abduction. Naomi froze, her face pale. Abduction? Torres nodded. There were child-sized restraints, duct tape, and chloroform. These men are connected to a trafficking ring that we've been tracking for months. Lily was likely their target. Naomi let out a strangled gasp, her hands flying to her mouth. My God, they were going to take her. Ethan's fists clenched on the armrests of his wheelchair, his knuckles white. If they had gotten their hands on her. His voice broke, and he looked away. Fury and helplessness battling in his expression. We have no intention of letting that happen, Torres assured them. We're putting everything we have into finding Bryce Dalton and his crew. They won't get another chance. Naomi turned to Ethan, her voice trembling with anger. This is why we can't afford to let them walk away. They need to pay for what they've done, for what they plan to do. Ethan's eyes met hers, and for the first time in years, they shared a united resolve. Later that evening, Ethan sat in his hospital bed, surrounded by reports and maps Torres had provided. Despite his physical pain, his mind was sharp, scanning the documents for patterns. Lily sat nearby, coloring in a notebook, while Naomi perched on the edge of a chair, watching Ethan with a mix of worry and admiration. You should be resting, Naomi said, breaking the silence. There's no time for rest, Ethan replied, not looking up. These men are predators. They've done this before, and they'll do it again unless we stop them. You're not a SEAL anymore, Ethan, Naomi said softly. You don't have to fight every battle. This isn't just any battle, he said, his voice tight. This is about our daughter. I'm not stopping until they're behind bars or worse. Naomi exhaled, running a hand through her hair. You're so stubborn, she said, her tone softening. You've always been like this. But what happens if you push yourself too far? Lily needs you alive, not broken. Ethan finally looked up, his gaze steady. I'll heal, but I can't live with myself if I don't do everything I can to protect her. Torres entered the room, interrupting the moment. She held up a folder. I think you'll want to see this. She spread out photos of other gang members who had been arrested in connection with Bryce's crew. We've identified several of Bryce's associates. Some of them are linked to similar abductions in neighboring states, but they've been careful, keeping their activities decentralized. Ethan studied the photos, his military training coming into play. They're operating like a cell, he said. Bryce is the field leader, but someone higher up is pulling the strings. Torres nodded. That's what we're starting to suspect. If we can take Bryce alive, he might lead us to whoever's running this operation. Ethan's jaw tightened. Then we need to make sure he doesn't slip through the cracks. Naomi's hand rested briefly on his shoulder, a silent gesture of support. We'll get them, she said, her voice steady. For Lily, for every family they've hurt. Despite the danger, Ethan felt a flicker of warmth at Naomi's presence. They were no longer estranged parents divided by old wounds. They were allies united in a singular purpose. Officer Torres leaned over a cluttered desk, her eyes scanning a map pinned to the wall. Red and blue markers indicated suspected gang locations, with the name Bryce Dalton circled in bold ink at the center. Ethan, now sitting slightly hunched but focused, reviewed the list of hideouts Torres had compiled. Bryce is on the run, but he won't stray far from his crew, he said, his voice firm. If he's their leader, they'll regroup around him. Torres nodded, tapping a finger on a location marked near an abandoned construction site. This place matches what we've seen from their patterns, remote but close enough to the city for quick getaways. Then that's where we start, Ethan replied. Hours later, a convoy of squad cars surrounded the site. Armed officers moved with precision, breaking down doors and sweeping the building. Inside, they found gang members scattered, some attempting to flee, others surrendering immediately. One officer cuffed a wiry man who cursed under his breath. Where's Bryce Dalton? Torres demanded, her voice sharp. The man sneered but said nothing. As the police continued their search, a message scrawled in red spray paint on a wall caught Torres's eye. You can't protect her forever. Torres's jaw tightened. He's taunting us. He wants us to know this isn't over. Ethan studied the message, his fists clenching. This isn't just about escape. It's about control. He's trying to keep us on edge. Though the raid was a partial success, Bryce remained elusive, leaving behind a chilling reminder of his intentions. Later that evening, in the hospital's family lounge, the atmosphere was tense. Ethan sat at the edge of a couch, his shoulders heavy with the day's events. Naomi stood across from him, her arms crossed, her anger barely restrained. This is exactly why I didn't want Lily with you. Naomi snapped, her voice trembling. You put her in harm's way. Ethan's expression darkened. You think I asked for this? That I wanted some gang to come after us? You're trained for this kind of danger, she shot back. But Lily isn't. She's a little girl. Ethan, she shouldn't have to live through something like this. Ethan stood slowly, his movements stiff from his injuries. I was trying to protect her. Everything I did that day was for her safety. Naomi's eyes glistened with unshed tears. And now she's having nightmares. She's terrified to close her eyes. Ethan, she keeps asking if the bad men are going to come back. Ethan's voice softened, his anger giving way to guilt. I know, and it kills me to see her like this. She needs stability. Ethan, Naomi continued, her tone softening slightly. She needs both of us to be on the same page, or she'll never feel safe again. For a moment, their shared concern for Lily created a fragile truce. You're right, Ethan admitted. She needs us together, and we'll make sure she knows she's safe. In the quiet of Ethan's hospital room, Lily sat curled in a chair, her knees tucked under her chin. She clutched her stuffed bear tightly, her eyes darting to the door every time it creaked. Naomi watched her daughter with growing concern. Sophia, sweetheart, are you okay? Lily hesitated, then shook her head. I'm scared. Mommy. Naomi knelt beside her, stroking her curls. You're safe here, baby. No one can hurt you. But what if they find us? Lily whispered, her voice trembling. The bad men said Daddy couldn't stay. What if they come back? Ethan, lying in the hospital bed, struggled to sit up despite Naomi's protests. Lily, come here, he said gently. Lily climbed onto the bed, curling into his side. Ethan wrapped an arm around her, his voice steady despite the pain. Those men can't hurt us anymore. The police are going to catch them, and they'll never come near you again. I promise. Lily sniffled. What if they don't catch them? Naomi sat on the edge of the bed, her hand resting on Lily's back. Then your daddy and I will do everything we can to keep you safe. You're our world. Lily, nothing matters more than you. Lily looked between her parents, her tears slowing. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of comfort, knowing they were united in protecting her. As night fell, Lily drifted off to sleep between Ethan and Naomi, their unspoken truth solidifying into something stronger. The muffled roar of a train echoed through the night as Bryce Dalton leaned against a graffiti-covered wall in the city's industrial outskirts. He lit a cigarette with shaky hands, his mind racing. His crew was scattered, several members already in custody, and the police were closing in fast. Bryce's phone buzzed in his pocket, a text from one of his remaining associates. Safe house in West Grove. Don't use the main roads. He crushed the cigarette under his boot and slipped into the shadows, weaving through the maze of warehouses. Bryce prided himself on his ability to evade the law, relying on his network of safe houses, burner phones, and corrupt allies to stay one step ahead. At the precinct, Officer Torres stared intently at a map dotted with red pins, each representing a location tied to Bryce's activities. We intercepted communications from a burner phone left at the safe house, she said, addressing her team. He's heading to West Grove. Does he have backup? One officer asked. Torres shook her head. The network's crumbling. He's desperate, but that makes him even more dangerous. We need to move now. The squad mobilized swiftly, setting up roadblocks and deploying plainclothes officers to monitor the area. The safe house in West Grove was a dilapidated building hidden behind a scrapyard, its windows boarded up and the yard littered with rusted metal. Torres led the team through the narrow pathways, her flashlight cutting through the dark. Inside, the smell of mildew mixed with the acrid scent of cigarette smoke. Torres gestured for silence as the officers fanned out, their weapons drawn. A creak on the second floor made everyone freeze. Upstairs, Torres whispered, signaling two officers to follow her. They climbed the stairs cautiously, each step groaning under their weight. At the top, they found a makeshift room, an old mattress, a pile of clothes, and a half-eaten sandwich. The window was open, curtains fluttering in the night breeze. He's gone, Torres muttered. frustration evident in her voice. But then she noticed something on the mattress. A small leather-bound journal lay open, its pages covered in Bryce's scrawled handwriting. She flipped through it, her heart sinking with every line. Plans for Lily's abduction were detailed in chilling precision. Routes, backup plans, and a network of contacts who would have facilitated the operation. Back at the precinct, Torres presented the journal to Ethan. Naomi's face paled as she skimmed the pages. "He planned everything," she whispered. "This wasn't random." Ethan's expression darkened, his fist clenching. "He thought he could take my daughter and get away with it. We'll use this," Torres assured them. "It's solid evidence to tie Bryce directly to the trafficking operation." Ethan stared at the journal, his voice low but firm. "We need to end this. Now." Naomi stood in the doorway of Ethan's home, clutching a small suitcase. Lily bounded in ahead of her, already familiar with the space she'd visited many weekends before. "You didn't have to stay," Ethan said, his tone neutral as he helped Naomi carry her bags inside. Naomi glanced at Lily, who was settling in on the couch with her favorite book. "She needs stability, Ethan. After everything that's happened, she can't feel like she's bouncing between us." For the next few days, the atmosphere in the house was tense but cooperative. Ethan and Naomi found themselves navigating parenting together again, from making Lily's breakfast to comforting her during her nightmares. One evening, as Lily fell asleep clutching her stuffed bear, Naomi sat across from Ethan at the dining table. The air between them was thick with unspoken words. "I'll admit," Naomi began, breaking the silence, "I was wrong about you." Ethan looked up from his laptop, surprised. "What do you mean?" Naomi folded her hands, struggling to find the right words. "When we divorced, I told myself you were too focused on your own battles to be the husband or father we needed. But seeing you now, what you've done for Lily, I realize I wasn't being fair." Ethan leaned back, his expression contemplative. "I made mistakes, Naomi. I let the seals consume me, and I wasn't there for you the way I should have been. But I've never stopped loving Lily or caring about you." Naomi looked away, her eyes glistening. "I just want Lily to feel safe again. She's been through so much." "She will," Ethan said firmly, "as long as we're both here for her." At that moment, the barriers between them began to crumble, replaced by a shared determination to protect their daughter and bring Bryce to justice. In the dimly lit precinct, Officer Torres outlined the plan with the precision of a military strategist. The intercepted burner phone communications revealed Bryce was seeking help to flee the city, reaching out to a dwindling network of allies. "He's desperate," Torres said, pointing to a whiteboard covered with maps and notes. "We'll use that to our advantage. He's already reached out to someone we've flagged as a low-level informant. We'll feed him intel that this ally has set up an escape route." Ethan leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "What's the bait?" Torres smirked. "A private airstrip just outside the city limits. The informant will claim he secured a pilot and safe passage. Bryce won't be able to resist." Naomi, seated nearby, interjected, her voice tense. "And where exactly does Ethan fit into this? He's already done enough." "I can help," Ethan said, his tone steady. "I know how Bryce thinks. I can anticipate his moves and provide tactical insights." "You're injured," Naomi countered, her frustration clear. "This isn't your fight anymore." "It is my fight," Ethan replied, his gaze unwavering. "He targeted our daughter. I'm not sitting on the sidelines while this monster gets away." Torres raised a hand, diffusing the tension. "Ethan will assist from the command post. No field work, just tactical support." Naomi sighed, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to argue further. "Fine, but if this goes sideways—" "It won't," Ethan assured her. "Not on my watch." The abandoned warehouse sat on the outskirts of the town, surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusting machinery. Inside, a skeleton crew of officers waited silently, their earpieces crackling with updates from Torres. "Bryce just crossed the perimeter," she reported from the command post, her eyes glued to the surveillance feed. In the warehouse, two undercover officers posing as Bryce's contacts stood near a makeshift table littered with fake passports they feigned nonchalance. Knowing the plan hinged on Bryce buying the setup. From the shadows, Bryce emerged, his movements cautious yet determined. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on the supposed escape supplies. "You sure this is clean?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "Clean as it gets," one officer replied. "Pilots on standby. But we need the rest of the money up front." Bryce chuckled darkly. Typical. Everyone's got their hand out. Before he could move closer, Torres's voice came through the officer's earpieces. "Now." Floodlights blazed to life, blinding Bryce as officers swarmed the building. "Police, don't move." Bryce spun around, momentarily stunned, but his survival instincts kicked in. He bolted toward a side exit, only to find it blocked by a tactical team. "Get down," Torres shouted, her gun trained on him. Bryce hesitated, his hands twitching as if debating whether to fight. Finally, he dropped to his knees, his bravado replaced by the cold realization that he was cornered. As officers cuffed him, Bryce sneered at Torres. "You think this ends with me?" he hissed. "You've got no idea what you're up against." Torres leaned in, her voice calm but cutting. "Oh, we'll find out. And when we do, you'll wish you'd stayed quiet." The precinct buzzed with energy as officers and investigators consolidated the mountain of evidence against Bryce. Torres stood in the middle of the operations room, reviewing stacks of documents and digital files. Bryce's journal was a centerpiece of the case, its meticulous details painting a damning picture of his plans for Lily and his gang's broader activities. Between this journal, intercepted communications, and the testimonies from his crew, we have an airtight case, Torres said to the assembled team. Ethan sat nearby, his eyes scanning the latest reports. Despite his injuries, he couldn't ignore the gravity of the operation's success. "What about Bryce's connections?" he hinted at someone higher up. Torres nodded grimly. "We're looking into it. But for now, Bryce is our main target. If he flips during the trial, we'll have leverage to go after the rest of the network." Naomi entered the room, her presence a mix of determination and concern. "What's the next step?" Torres gestured to a timeline on the whiteboard. "We present our evidence to the DA tomorrow. If everything goes as planned, Bryce will be formally charged with conspiracy, attempted abduction, and trafficking-related offenses." Naomi glanced at Ethan, her expression softening. "You did it," she said quietly. "We did it," Ethan corrected, meeting her gaze. As the weight of the operation's success settled over the room, Ethan and Naomi both knew the fight wasn't over. But now they had the upper hand. The courtroom was packed, buzzing with murmurs as reporters, activists, and concerned citizens filled the seats. The case had drawn national attention, a stark reflection of the rising tension surrounding hate crimes and their victims. Bryce Dalton sat at the defendant's table, flanked by his defense team. His arrogant smirk had faded, replaced with an expression of cold defiance. At the prosecution's table, Naomi adjusted her notes, her gaze fixed on the jury. Though she was here in a professional capacity, her role as Lily's mother lent her an unshakable resolve. Ethan sat in the witness section, his face stoic as he prepared for his turn on the stand. The prosecuting attorney, Kevin Walker, rose to deliver his opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice firm yet measured. "This case is about more than one man's crimes. It's about holding accountable those who use hatred and violence to terrorize our communities." Walker outlined the charges: assault, attempted kidnapping, conspiracy, and hate crimes. He promised to present irrefutable evidence, from Ethan's testimony to the chilling details in Bryce's journal. When Ethan took the stand, the courtroom grew silent. Dressed in a crisp suit, his injury still faintly visible, he looked every bit the formidable man who had faced down Bryce and his gang. "Mr. Carter," Walker began, "can you recount what happened on the day of the attack?" Ethan's voice was steady, though his eyes flickered with the weight of the memory. "I was at the park with my daughter, Lily. We were enjoying our weekend together when Bryce Dalton and his gang approached us. They claimed I didn't belong there, but they said Lily could stay." A ripple of discomfort spread through the room. "And then?" Walker prompted. They surrounded us. Ethan continued. Bryce taunted me, trying to provoke a reaction. When I refused to back down, they attacked. My only thought was to protect my daughter. Walker leaned forward. Did Bryce make any threats during the attack? Yes, Ethan said firmly. He said I wouldn't be able to keep her safe and implied they had plans for her. Bryce's defense attorney, Linda Green, stood for cross-examination, her tone sharp. Mr. Carter, as a former Navy SEAL, would you say you're trained in combat? Yes, Ethan replied. And isn't it true that your training makes you a formidable fighter? Perhaps even more dangerous than the average person? Ethan's gaze didn't waver. My training isn't about aggression. It's about protection. I only fought to defend my daughter. Green tried to paint Ethan as a potential aggressor, but Walker countered with the undeniable evidence of the gang's intent, including the journal and Ethan's injuries. The bailiff called Lily to the stand, her small figure dwarfed by the imposing courtroom. She clutched a stuffed bear, a gift from her father, as she walked to the witness chair. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? The clerk asked. Lily nodded, her voice a quiet, I do. Naomi, seated near the prosecution, clenched her hands tightly as Walker approached Lily with a gentle smile. Lily, he began, his tone soft. Can you tell us what you remember about that day in the park? Lily hesitated, her wide eyes darting toward her father for reassurance. Ethan gave her a small nod. The men came, she said, her voice trembling. They yelled at Daddy and said mean things. I was scared. Walker crouched slightly to meet her eye level. What did your daddy do? He told me to stay behind him, Lily said, tears brimming in her eyes. He said everything would be okay. And did the men hurt your daddy? Lily nodded, her tears spilling over. They hit him, and he fell down. He told me to call for help. Her words hung in the air, tugging at the hearts of everyone in the room. Even the judge leaned forward, visibly moved. When Green cross-examined, she refrained from questioning Lily too harshly, knowing any attempt to undermine the child's testimony would backfire. Lily's bravery had already made an indelible impact. After days of testimonies, including damning accounts from Bryce's former gang members, closing arguments commenced. Walker's voice was resolute. This case isn't about isolated acts of violence. It's about a deliberate, hate-fueled agenda. Bryce Dalton and his gang terrorized a father and daughter, intending to strip them of their safety and humanity. But justice demands accountability, and today we ask you to deliver it. Green tried to cast doubt on the intent behind the gang's actions, arguing they were reckless but not premeditated. Yet the journal and recovered communications told a different story, painting Bryce as the mastermind behind a sinister plan. After hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The foreman handed a slip of paper to the judge, who reviewed it before addressing the courtroom. Will the defendant please rise? Bryce stood, his defiance flickering into unease. On the charge of assault, the jury finds the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted kidnapping, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, guilty. On the charge of hate crimes, guilty. The courtroom erupted in murmurs as Bryce's jaw clenched, his bravado finally crumbling. The judge continued, her tone stern. Mr. Dalton, your actions were not only criminal but abhorrent. The evidence demonstrates a calculated effort to instill fear and harm. This court sentences you to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Cheers erupted from the gallery while Ethan and Naomi exchanged a look of relief and quiet triumph. Lily, seated beside her mother, hugged her bear tightly, a small smile breaking through her lingering fear. In a cozy therapy office adorned with warm colors and child-friendly decor, Lily sat on a plush couch clutching her bear. Across from her, Dr. Melanie Carter, a child psychologist, smiled gently. How are you feeling today, Lily? Dr. Carter asked. Lily tilted her head, her feet swinging slightly. Better, I think. The nightmares aren't as scary anymore. That's great to hear, Dr. Carter said. And what about school? Are you feeling safe there? Lily nodded. My friends are really nice, and Daddy and Mommy always talk to me before bed, so I don't feel so scared. Dr. Carter leaned forward. You're very brave. Lily, you've been through a lot, but you're showing everyone how strong you are. Later that evening, Lily sat at the dining table between Ethan and Naomi, her eyes sparkling as she recounted her day at school. And then I told my teacher that I'm not scared of bullies because my daddy is the strongest person ever, Lily said proudly. Ethan chuckled. I think your teacher might be right. Naomi exchanged a glance with Ethan, their shared pride in Lily evident. The small, everyday moments were beginning to stitch their family back together. It was a quiet evening at Ethan's home. Lily was fast asleep, her bear tucked under one arm as she dreamed peacefully. Downstairs, Ethan and Naomi sat on the couch, a soft glow from the fireplace lighting the room. Naomi sipped her tea, breaking the comfortable silence. You've done so much for her, Ethan. For us. I just did what any father would do, Ethan replied, his voice steady. Naomi shook her head. No, Ethan. Not every father would stand up the way you did. Not every father would put everything on the line to protect their child. And not every father would find a way to bring calm to the storm. Ethan's gaze met hers, his eyes searching. I wasn't always the man I should have been, Naomi. But when I looked at Lily that day in the park, all I could think about was her safety, her future. That's why I fought so hard. Naomi leaned back, her expression softening. I see now that I didn't fight hard enough for us, for our family. I thought walking away would protect me, but it just made everything harder for you, for Lily, and for me. Ethan hesitated, his voice quiet. Do you think it's too late for us? Naomi looked down at her hands, then back at him. I don't know, but I do know that Lily needs us together. And I know that I've never stopped caring about you, even when I tried to convince myself otherwise. Ethan reached out his hand, resting lightly on hers. I've never stopped caring about you either, Naomi. For a moment, they sat in silence, the warmth of the fireplace enveloping them. The cracks in their relationship hadn't vanished, but the desire to rebuild had finally emerged. The sun shone brightly as the Carter family walked down the familiar path leading to the park. The once ominous site of the attack now appeared peaceful, alive with the laughter of children and the rhythmic crunch of jogging shoes on the trail. It had been months since that day, but the memory lingered, especially for Lily, who gripped Ethan's hand tightly as they approached the swings. You sure about this? Naomi asked, glancing at Ethan. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, her concern evident. I am, Ethan replied, his voice steady. This isn't just about reclaiming the park. It's about showing Lily and ourselves that we're stronger than what happened here. Lily looked up at her father, her big brown eyes wide but brave. Can I go on the swings now, Daddy? Ethan knelt down, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Of course, sweetheart. Go have fun. Mommy and I will be right here. Lily hesitated for only a moment before breaking into a grin. She dashed toward the swings, her laughter filling the air as she pumped her legs, gaining height with every arc. Ethan stood, exhaling softly. Naomi watched him closely, noting the way his eyes followed their daughter protectively. It feels different now, Naomi said after a moment. Not as heavy. It's because we're here together, Ethan said, slipping his hand into hers. This park doesn't belong to fear anymore. It belongs to her and us. Naomi squeezed his hand, a small smile playing on her lips. You're full of speeches these days. Call it perspective, Ethan replied, his tone light but sincere. They began to walk along the path, their footsteps falling into rhythm. The tension that had once defined their relationship seemed to have lifted, replaced by a newfound ease. As the afternoon wore on, they found a shaded bench beneath an old oak tree, not far from where Lily played with newfound friends on the jungle gym. She's resilient, Naomi said, watching Lily laugh as she slid down the slide. She gets that from you, Ethan said, leaning back against the bench. Naomi turned to him, a teasing smile on her face. And here I thought she got it from you, Navy SEAL and all. Maybe a little from both of us, Ethan admitted with a chuckle. The moment of levity gave way to a quiet, contemplative pause. Naomi broke the silence first, her voice soft but deliberate. I've been thinking a lot about us. she began. About everything we've been through these past few months. It's been hard, but, but it's also brought us closer. Ethan finished, his gaze steady on hers. Naomi nodded, her expression thoughtful. I was so focused on what went wrong before, what broke us apart. But seeing you with Lily, watching how much you fought for her, it reminded me of who you really are. Ethan reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, and it reminded me of who you are, too. You've always been her anchor, Naomi, and maybe I didn't always show it, but I saw that. I still see it. Tears welled in Naomi's eyes, but she blinked them away, a smile breaking through. Do you think we can do this? Really rebuild what we had? Ethan squeezed her hand. I think we can try. Not for the past, but for the future. For Lily. She deserves to have us both by her side. Naomi leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder. Then let's try. One step at a time. They sat in comfortable silence, their hearts lighter than they had been in years. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park, Lily ran up to them, her cheeks flushed and her eyes bright. Daddy, Mommy, look what I made, she exclaimed, holding up a crown of dandelion and clovers. It's beautiful, sweetheart, Ethan said, bending down to let her place it on his head. Do I look like a king now? Lily giggled. No, Daddy, you look funny. Naomi laughed, pulling Lily into her lap. I think you look perfect. See, your mom has good taste, Ethan said with a wink. The three of them shared a laugh, the kind that felt effortless and pure.